A very good morning to all present. On behalf of Study Circle, I invite you to the 88th meeting. Today's topic is a lecture series on art of arbitration, and this would be the first out of the lecture series conducted by Mr. Ashok Pati, advocate, Madras High Court, and an arbitrator. I now request Mr. Siva Shanmugam, advocate in the Madras High Court, to give a welcome address and a brief introduction of the speaker.
Good morning and welcome you all to the lecture series on art of arbitration. Mr. Ashok Pati got enrolled himself in the year 1994, and he mastered himself in the civil litigations both in the trials as well as in the appellate side from the office of Mr. S. T. Ramalingam and his father Gajapati. Later, he joined the office of Mr. V. Ramachandran, senior advocate, a renowned tax practitioner. He acquitted himself well in tax litigation. Thereafter, he migrated to the field of arbitration. He started PAS Associates as well as Sinica, Center for National and International Commercial Arbitration, and he is doing well. His experience and exposure in the field of arbitration spans more than a decade, and he is well versed in the art of arbitrations, both as a panel advocate as well as an arbitrator. With this brief introduction, I call upon Mr. Ashok Pati to commence this lecture series on art of arbitration. And as a willing student, I am ready to take notes. Thank you.
Good morning, one and all. And present this series. When Siva Shanmugam was asking me, why don't you do a particular session on arbitration? I was just thinking whether I should, as usual, take up one topic alone and then go ahead, or take the Arbitration Act in the perspective of a practitioner and discuss about the same, so that it would be easier for the newcomers who are entering into this field of arbitration. The entire process I had only dealt with as if I am in the process of entering into the practice of arbitration. In other words, those doubts that which I had at the time of my initiation of practice in arbitration, all those things have now transpired into my literature today. Friends, arbitration is, I always say, is the most civilized form of resolving disputes. There's one judge who also asked me, seeing this, then do you mean to say that court is not a civilized one? By civilized one, I would say that a manner in which an amicable settlement with the shortest of period of litigation and the most economical manner in which a resolution can be arrived at is, in my opinion, would be the most civilized form of resolving litigation. And that, my friends, I have been finding it very much in the arbitration process. So the question now is, when a client comes in, he always brings up an agreement and says, sir, I've got this agreement, now I've entered into a dispute. I'm not able to solve out further. The wonder clause of arbitration would be present there. And immediately we'll say, oh, there is an arbitration clause. Appreciate your client for the good and intelligent work that he has done by including the arbitration clause at the time of entering into the contract. Now, from there, how do we resolve that dispute which has arisen out of this particular contract? Now, where do we start an arbitration process would be the most important question that one would ask for himself. The first point of resolving dispute starts not at the time of incorporating a clause in the agreement. A clause in the agreement is only foreseeing how you want to resolve the dispute, and rather it doesn't commence the arbitration proceedings. So the commencement of a resolution process starts only by way of a communication intimating that I am interested in resolving this dispute in the modus that we have agreed upon, namely the arbitration process. This particular communication is envisaged in Section 21 of the Arbitration Conciliation Act. Friends, this Section 21 comes under Chapter 5, which deals with the conduct of the arbitration proceedings. As you all know that arbitration proceedings is predominantly based on party autonomy. In this chapter especially, every section almost starts with the word unless otherwise agreed by the parties. So even the commencement of arbitration process, the parties are given the autonomy to choose the methodology how they want to commence it. It may be in the form of a notice, it may be in the form of any other mode of communication, or it may also be on a particular time when things are not happening. Immediately thereafter, the arbitration can commence. It can be incorporated in any manner the parties are wanting to communicate their intention to raise the arbitration dispute. If none of it has been found in the agreement, then it is up to the parties to first enumerate the disputes, then refer those disputes, and that communication should have reached the respondent. So the three ingredients here in section 21 is enumeration of dispute, and then referring that dispute to arbitration, and then communication of the same to the respondent. Now the question arises whether an arbitration process has or the initiation of arbitration process should be in writing or can it be oral. Nowhere in the act one would see that the section mandates for the communication to be in writing. It only says a communication to be received by the respondent. But however, in the practice, we always go for writing and we issue a notice in writing. There has been a situation in ABL Limited versus Cement Corporation of India, 1993-234, Delhi, in which the Honorable Court was pleased to hold that a reference notice need not be in writing, as the section does not insist that it should be in writing. It is sufficient that it can be communicated by any other means apart from writing, maybe in oral also, or by any telecommunication conversation, provided there is a proof for it and which is not disputed at any point of time. Next, once this communication is in the form of writing, you communicate. How do you communicate? To whom it is to be communicated is one important aspect. This section also clarifies that it has to be communicated to the respondent. In practice, we find that it is not always to the respondent that we communicate. There are many situations where we communicate to the respondent through a different mode, that one of the parties will appoint an arbitrator, or it says that the parties may mutually appoint an arbitrator. In those circumstances, the communication is made directly to the concerned respondent or to the arbitrator with a copy marked to the respondent. In any event, what is important is the communication of the intention to initiate arbitration proceedings is what is important. There are situations where an institution clause would be incorporated in the agreement. In such cases, the communication is sent to the institution with a copy marked to the respondent. In certain other cases, there would also be a possibility when the parties to the contract would have named an arbitrator. So the parties can directly write to the arbitrator stating that we want to initiate the arbitration proceedings, kindly get into the appointment and reference and proceed with the resolution of arbitration dispute. Such a letter also, if it is marked to the respondent, then that also amounts to commencement of arbitration. In AP Power Coordination Committee versus Lanco Kondapalli Power Limited, 2016-3 SEC 468, it has been held that the arbitration notice is issued, when it is issued, amounts to initiation of the proceedings. Rather, this judgment confirms with the meaning of the section 21 to say that an arbitration proceedings commences on the issuance of a notice. Friends, what makes it more important for the commencement date to be noted is the time of limitation. This is one important aspect for which we need to know the commencement of arbitration. Section 3 of Limitation Act, as you would all recollect, would state that a suit is instituted the moment it is filed in the court. So the institution of a suit or the commencement of a suit starts on the date when the complaint is filed in the registry. However, no such mention has been stated by the Act, that is namely the Limitation Act, with respect to arbitration. So section 21 comes to the rescue and it states that the date on which the communication is received will be considered for the purpose of limitation. This has been held so in State of Goa versus Praveen Enterprises 2012 SEC 581. It has also been confirmed in Milk Food versus GMC Ice Cream Limited 2012 to 12 SEC 581. Therefore, friends, what becomes more important today is the date on which the commencement of arbitration, which governs not only the limitation for instituting the suit, it also adds one more thing prior to the amendment, the date on which the arbitration has to be completed. Now, of course, subsequent to the 2019 amendment, it has become date from which the pleadings were completed. So, by which the arbitrator has to complete the arbitration proceedings. Now, we have gone to say that our communication can be in writing or it can be in oral. Let's assume the communication, rather the reference letter, is in the form of a written communication. How is it to be deemed to have been received by the respondent? A section says received. So does it mean that actual receipt alone amounts to a receipt of communication, or does it mean anything else apart from actual receipt? The section 3 of the Arbitration Conciliation Act, it is almost in parlance with the General Clauses Act, would talk about deemed communication. It states that a communication shall be deemed to be completed if it is sent to the usual place of business or habitual residence of the respondent. And in case these two addresses are not available, and after inquiry, it can be sent to the last known address, and which amounts to a deemed services. So the article is deemed to have been received by the respondent on the date on which actual receipt is made or the date on which the first intimation is made. In certain cases where it has been held, I was not able to rely on the judgment, but it has been held by the court that the date on which a communication is given and subsequently returned as unclaimed also, the first date of intimation delivered will be taken as the date of delivery. Friends, what happens is this notice, section 21 notice, becomes the crucial aspect of it. However, law has explained it's not technical about notice. Russell on arbitration also holds that the notice is not to be read on too technical aspect. It has to be given a liberal interpretation. In line with that, again in ABB APL Limited versus Cement Corporation of India, it was held that it would be sufficient that a mere intention of the communication is mentioned, that would be sufficient reference letter. Friends, here we need to also note that there may be lateral communication between the parties earlier also, to and fro. The parties can even say that all those disputes which we have been referring to, or in continuation with the earlier communication, now that the disputes have come to such an extent, I want to resolve it by arbitration, would again constitute a valid arbitration notice or reference notice. So the content aspect of the dispute. Now I'm coming to the aspect of enumeration of dispute. It need not mention every aspect of dispute, but it is necessary that it covers an idea of what are all the dispute that is to be referred to. A notice merely stating that the disputes or the disputes have arisen and the invoking of the arbitration clause is sufficient. Notice, it has been held so in Veena versus Seth Industries 2011 to RAG 194, Bombay. The reference to previous communications and notices with respect to the disputes would also be sufficient. Here one has to note that it is not only the previous communication, an idea of what their people or the parties are transacting also will be sufficient. In fact, there may be 2 or 3 different parts of a contract. There will be dispute with respect to one part alone. Then the parties can raise the dispute with respect to part 1 alone and leave the part 2 and 3 to continue in work in progress. Later on, when part 2 is taken up and there is a dispute, it is not prohibited for the parties to raise the reference again. In other words, an arbitration in a contract, disputes can be severed and referred to separately also. All that has to be done in such cases, what is being referred has to be mentioned in the letter. Now, having said this and made it that it is important to issue a notice of reference, can this notice of reference be waived? Would be another question. Section 4 of the Act would say, whenever there is a procedure to be followed and such procedure raised within a particular period of time which is agreed or as stipulated, then it would amount to waiver. However, friends, I would not suggest that reference notice would amount to a waiver. This is for the simple reason that Section 34(2)(a)(3) specifically states when a notice of reference is not issued or appointment of arbitrator is not issued, the entire arbitration process becomes liable to be set aside. So pausing here for a moment, let's now see that Section 21 does not say it is mandatory or it cannot be waived. It doesn't say explicitly that it can be waived. But it is the same part. Section 4 also says there are certain procedures which, if it is waived, can be, which is not followed, can be considered as waived. However, Section 34 gives the mandatory requirement to mention that this particular notice cannot be waived. This is more so because of the time limit for calculating the limitation and the commencement of the process. Now, what would be the effect of not issuing a notice? The entire process of arbitration and the award, which is the outcome of that arbitration award, there is a chance that it being set aside for the same reason. Such an issue can be raised and decided by the arbitrator, namely the issue whether this particular notice was not issued. Can it be raised before the arbitrator? Yes, it can be raised. What happens is, again, there is no provision under the Act which talks about which gives a provision or enables the parties to raise this particular aspect of non-issuance of reference notice and seeking the arbitration process to be null and void. However, the courts have held, namely in Alupro Building Systems Private Limited versus Ozone Sea Overseas Private Limited, 2018 3 RAJ 94, that the arbitration tribunal is entitled to go into this aspect and give a finding to that. Now, all along we have been discussing about how to initiate an arbitration and what is the communication. Repeated the word disputes. Now, here is the Pandora box. What types of disputes are arbitrable? This question has been on and off, coming in and off from the Supreme Court's desk throughout the jurists in various parts of the world also. And this march of law has been in great strides. It has traveled a lot, giving a different perspective as on date. If one goes to the entire Act, namely the Arbitration Conciliation Act, a hint is given in Section 2(3) of the Act, which states that this part shall not affect any law for the time being in force by virtue of certain disputes that may not be submitted to arbitration. So all that it says is, if there is any other law for the time being, and in that particular law, if those disputes are not subjected to arbitration, then those disputes cannot be arbitrated. Now, here again, we need to see there is another provision which talks about disputes which cannot be arbitrated. That is Section 34(2)(b)(1). The subject matter of this dispute not capable of settlement by arbitration under law for the time being in force. So an analogy of these two provisions we can see, one is a statutory bar is there, and then another one is by the law for the time being in force, which can be even the customary practice also. So all these put together forms the arbitrability of a dispute. Generally, a civil dispute can be referred to arbitration. I would usually go on to write down what are all the civil disputes that can be arbitrated. Today, I'm not going to do that because we know for sure what are all the civil disputes. So writing down and explaining it is only going to take more time rather than give any clear explanation. Instead, we will go in depth of it, where we will consider what civil disputes can be brought into arbitration and what are the civil disputes which cannot be brought into arbitration. Now, we all know that there are certain, the law is divided into two parts, substantive law and the procedural law. The substantive law gives us the rights and duties of ours, whereas the procedural law gives the process in which the substantive rights or obligation has to be enforced. Now, we all know about Civil Procedure Code. Civil Procedure Code is a procedural law, by and large procedural law. Substantive law like the Transfer of Property Act, Contract Act, all these things become a substantive law. There are certain enactments which are both substantive and procedural. The present in limelight, namely the IBC code, is both substantive and procedural. The Company Code, again, NCLT, which has been found for the Companies Act 2013, where mismanagement is there, it has to go only towards the NCLT. Consumer Protection Act, which gives the substantive right and also the procedural right. We have the Motor Vehicle Accidents Tribunal, which also covers both. Now we have even the Tamil Nadu Regulation of Rights and Responsibility of Landlord and Tenants Act 2017, Income Tax Act, GST, it goes on. All these acts are both substantial and procedural, so they get along together. Now, wherever the enactment is substantive and procedural, both combined, in those places, the arbitrability, even if it is a civil dispute, is restricted. This arbitrability is again divided into two parts, namely just in rem and just in personam. Wherever the dispute is just in rem, then it becomes non-arbitrable. Wherever it is in personam and which is not arising out of a just in rem, then it is arbitrable. Now, Vidya Drolia is a recent case in which this aspect of arbitrability of dispute was considered at good length. Vidya Drolia and others versus Durga Trading Corporation 2020 SEC online SC 1018. This judgment becomes very important for this fact that it covers a particular ambit of law which can be referred to arbitration or not. In Himangani Enterprises, the entire arbitrability of tenancy dispute was considered. However, that judgment has now been overruled by Vidya Drolia, where it has been found that tenancy disputes which are not governed by any specific act or special act, then they can be arbitrated. Now, the short synopsis of Vidya Drolia is that tenancy disputes which are only from out of the Transfer of Property Act, then it can be arbitrated. If it is arising out of, say for instance, the Tamil Nadu, Tamil Nadu Regulation of Rights and Responsibilities of Landlords and Tenants Act 2017, then it cannot be arbitrated. Similarly, fraud. Serious fraud, assailing the judgment of Avitel, the court have held that serious fraud cannot be arbitrated. However, certain fraud which are not entered into for the purpose of the arbitration clause can be arbitrated. With respect to the fraud, I will go in further detail in henceforth. The third point which was considered in Vidya Drolia was the Debt Recovery Tribunal. Whether the disputes which are before the Debt Recovery Tribunal, are they arbitrable or not, was also considered. Here it was found that the Debt Recovery Tribunal, those disputes which are within the jurisdiction of debt recovery tribunal, then they cannot be arbitrated. This has overruled the judgment of HDFC versus Satpal Singh Bakshi. The court had actually found that since the Debt Recovery Act provided for the entire process, and it is a substantive and the procedural law, it has to be considered there. Here again, one has to see what is gest and rem and what are the things which are coming within the purview of gest and rem which cannot be arbitrated. An example is probate proceedings, divorce act proceedings, appointment of guardian, appointment of mental health guardian. Of course, that act itself has been repealed, and now we are in a state where we cannot have one. Then the criminal law, again by practice and procedure and the criminal procedure code, we have all the criminal laws which are governed by the criminal procedure, and so they cannot be arbitrated. The question of gest and rem was again, in fact, further discussed in Booz Allen versus Hamilton Incorporation versus State Bank of India Home Finance Limited, 2011, 5 SEC 532. Friends, this I'm bringing it at this point of time because on conjoint reading of Vidya Drolia and Booz Allen, one can now come to the conclusion that Booz Allen definitely requires a revisit. What was stated in Booz Allen was that a dispute which is in the nature of mortgage suit or a specific performance cannot be arbitrated. Whereas the only point of contention raised and held by the Honorable Supreme Court was that CPC provides for preliminary decree and a final decree. So it is only in those circumstances the arbitration can be, these disputes with respect to the mortgage suit can be resolved. However, friends, now we have seen that Transfer of Property Act does only give us the substantial right. When we are given with the substantial right, it doesn't talk about which procedure I am to apply. Now, if I want to adopt a procedure as mentioned in CPC, then I would go there for that position of going for a preliminary decree and a final decree. In my opinion, I feel that Transfer of Property Act handles it effectively well for all the mortgage suits to be tried by arbitration itself. If at all a person wants to have a preliminary decree and a final decree, Arbitration Act again provides by a partial award and a final award. So we have the entire infrastructure in the arbitration proceedings itself. So it is necessary that Booz Allen has to be revisited, and it has rightly been referred to the larger bench and it is pending. Now we will come to the aspect of fraud. Can fraud be arbitrated? Competence is the important aspect of philosophy of arbitration here in our country. The doctrine of competence to competence means that an arbitrator's authority to rule on its own jurisdiction. It is based on this, the principle whether a fraud can be arbitrated or not is also to be governed by. The earliest judgment in this regard is N. Radhakrishnan versus Mastro Engineering, 2010, 1 SEC 72. It was held in this case that fraud cannot be arbitrated. And the reason given by the Honorable Court was that huge voluminous documents and evidence have to be gone in at length, and hence it would not be possible for the arbitral tribunal to go with respect to the deciding on the question of fraud. The judgment was an inspiration of Russell versus Russell, an English law, which now has become redundant. In fact, another judgment also was cited therein, which was Abdul Qadir versus Madhav Prabhakar, which arose from the 1940 Act. Even in English law today, fraud is liable to be arbitrated. Of course, not all fraud. I will explain to you in detail what are the types of fraud or on what gambit a fraud can be arbitrated. In fact, the present law in our country also goes to the same extent. After the N. Radhakrishnan case, we had Bharat Rasiklal and Bharat Rasiklal's case in 2012 2 SEC 144. Again, in this case, it was held that fraud cannot be determined at the pre-arbitration stage itself. In this case, what happened was the question of fraud was raised before the court at the provision of Section 11, wherein the appointment of arbitrator was sought for. The court said this is too early to arrive at whether this case is coming under fraud or not, so we cannot decide on this stage. Ayyasamy versus Paramasivam. This was a real turnaround in 2016, 10 SEC 386, where for the first time it was held by the Supreme Court that serious fraud alone cannot be arbitrated. Whether fraud is induced to get an arbitration agreement or a fraud represented, etc., are involved to premeets the entire contract. If the fraud was to touch upon the internal aspects, then there is no implication of the public domain, then it can be arbitrated. This was the finding given in Ayyasamy's case. Now, this was further developed in Avitel Post Studios Limited and others versus HSBC PL Holding Mauritius Limited, 2020 SEC Online SC 5656. Here again, it was held that where fraud is covered under Section 17 of the Contract Act, then it can be tried by the civil court. And such a dispute can also be arbitrated. Now, what happens in this judgment, to consolidate, is when a fraud issue can be arbitrated, when can be tried by a civil court, the said fraud issue can also be tried by arbitrator. Now, if there is a fraud issue which cannot be tried by the civil court and has to only go to the criminal court, then such a dispute also will not be arbitrated. So the entire process today is to be seen as whether the fraud was used to get into the depth of the entire issue, inclusive of the arbitration clause, then it has to go only to the criminal court. Where the fraud is one of the issue whereby the party had the consent under Section 17, and the consent was in respect of Section 17 of the Contract Act, then such disputes can be arbitrated, and that is what Avitel Post confirms. This position has even subsequently been confirmed in NN Global Mercantile Private Limited versus Indo-Unique Flame Limited and others, 2021 SEC SC 19. Now, friends, this Avitel has been approved not only by NN Global, and prior to that, Vidya Drolia also. So the position as on date is, if the fraud comes within the purview of Section 17 of the Contract Act, then such matter can be arbitrated. Now, coming to the last aspect of what are the matters that can be arbitrated. Now, in a contract, all disputes arising out of the said contracts can be arbitrated. However, if the contract specifically excludes certain portion of the contract, which will not be arbitrable or which will not come within the purview of arbitration, then such provisions will not be arbitrable. So therefore, what we get here is, if a contract has two parts, then part A will be arbitrable. Part B, if they say it will go before the superintendent or the chief engineer, then it goes before the chief engineer or the superintendent, as the case may be. It will not become an arbitrable dispute. So this is again based on the parties' autonomy. Friends, here I would now like to share a model reference agreement with you all. Reference letter. So which gives an idea of how we can draft one. Friends, this is the reference letter, a simple model. Here, one Mr. Chandran is raising a default, and one Mr. Suryan is raising a arbitration claim. He is initiating this arbitration process. The agreement entered into between them is mentioned. The initiation of the arbitration, the intention is mentioned here. Now, this is a reference letter, a simple format of the reference letter. As I said, Suryan is a person who is making a claim. And his response here, the respondent is Chandran, and the agreement is dated 14/5/2020. Here we get the date of agreement, which is in reference. We also find that the intention of the parties to refer to arbitration is mentioned. And over the pay or down, we go on to say what type of business relationship that people had. I am not here mentioning the entire invoices that are pending. All those things are not required. I mentioned the agreement, what is there. And I'm saying that there are various districts that he is doing a marketing job. But my dispute today is only with respect to the district in Madurai alone. It's only pertaining to Madurai district. And I'm saying that with respect to Madurai, I have this issue. So what happens here is the dispute with respect to Madurai alone is now taken up for arbitration. Later on, if a Tiruchi district issue also comes in, a separate arbitration can also be raised, and it doesn't debar a party from initiating a fresh arbitration on the same contract. It is only on the same dispute it cannot be raised again, but whereas it can be raised on a separate dispute arising out of the same contract. Here what I have stated is what is the amount which is due and the rate of interest and the entire amount that is claimed by me. I've also appointed a person as an arbitrator, and I've called for a requisite that let this be settled amicably in due time. So this is all that I have done, and I have marked a copy to the arbitrator. So this simple letter would suffice to have the arbitration referred to. Friends, one important aspect that I need to bring it to you all is, while drafting an arbitration notice or a reference notice, as I earlier told you all, the entire gambit of proceedings need not be said. I have seen arbitration notices running to 80 pages, not necessary at all. At the same time, if you don't give the necessary particulars, then I doubt whether it will become a proper notice. One small example I would state here. There are people who have started issue notices in the form of a demand. End of it, they would not even appoint an arbitrator. They would not say that they are referring the dispute to arbitrator. Nothing would be said. They will say that if you don't agree and if you don't settle, then I will appoint an arbitrator, or thereafter I will appoint to refer the disputes to arbitration. Whether this will amount to a proper reference, in my opinion, I have utmost doubt. Today, as on date, many of these notices are escaping because of the lenient view taken by the court in stating that we shall go only in a liberal form. When things become stringent, these aspects will be very important. It cannot be a demand notice at all. It has to be a specific reference. Why is it so? Because of the period of limitation is calculated from this point forward, it becomes very important. So if it is just going to be a demand notice, we all know a demand notice will never save limitation. It is only the institution of a suit. Similarly, it is only the initiation of the arbitration which can save the limitation. So with this, friends, I have completed with respect to the initiation of arbitration. I've taken 40 minutes of your time, and I prefer taking more questions from you from here onwards.
Thank you. There was one question from Mr. Arun Kumar. He wanted you to give a few examples on what constitutes a civil dispute.
Civil dispute, is it? Okay. A partnership dispute is a civil dispute. A person who has taken money and not paid it back is a civil dispute. A person who has got a portion of the property with a license, then that license dispute is amounting to a civil dispute. Beware there, it is not a tenancy dispute. It is only a license dispute. Then you have the distributors agreement, joint venture agreement. All these things amount to a civil dispute. In short, we can say that most of the civil cases that we are filing are all civil in nature, excepting for the fact of appointment of guardian or appointment of mental health person's guardian, or for that matter, even the probate proceedings, letters of administration proceedings. These things will all not come under, though it may be civil, it will not be arbitrable, because they all come under just in rem, as I told you.
There's another question from Mr. Raghavendran. He says he's asking whether an arbitrator has the power to set aside an ex parte order passed by him or her, and when will that power be exercised? When can that power be exercised?
Friend, there is a Delhi High Court judgment, if I'm correct, which talks about this power. Here too, I'm not very confident in answering that, saying that the judgment is in the correct perspective of law. An arbitrator on signing the award becomes functus officio. The only other order that he can pass is by way of rectification under 33. Prior to 2019 and subsequent to 2015, there was an amendment which permitted the arbitrator to go on and pass orders of interim nature even subsequent to award. Even that was withdrawn for the simple reason the Law Commission found that the arbitrator was functus officio and he cannot pass any interim orders also. So the only order that he can pass is rectification. So thereafter he cannot. So in my opinion, an arbitrator will not be able to set aside his own award.
There's a question from Mr. Siva Shanmugam. He asks, what are all the essential ingredients for a valid notice for arbitration?
The valid notice, ingredients for a valid arbitration notice, as I said earlier, here is 3 points. You have to mention in nutshell at least, what the dispute is. You have an intention to refer the dispute to arbitration, and you communicate that dispute to the intention to the respondent. These are the 3 important aspects which are required. Once you comply with this, that is sufficient enough to say that you have initiated an arbitration proceedings.
Mr. Jayaprakash has a question. After issuance of notice, is there any statutory waiting period for commencement of arbitration proceedings? Do we need to wait for the other side to respond?
It all depends on the nature of initiation of arbitration or the agreement in which the parties have agreed upon. If the parties had agreed upon a particular institution to be the appointing authority for appointing authority, then the arbitration process, which has commenced as per the section 21 notice, will continue. There is no statutory limit period at all. But however, if the parties have agreed that they will mutually agree upon the appointment of arbitrator, then the statutory period of 30 days comes in, wherein the respondent is either to agree upon the arbitrator or disagree and suggest another arbitrator. So in such circumstances alone, you need the 30 days notice. Otherwise, the process can immediately start and proceed.
There's another question. Could you please elaborate on the issue of reference of specific performance issues to arbitration?
Booz Allen's case, actually what it has done is it has stated that these enactment, even specific relief act, will come within the purview of non-arbitrability, and it says it comes within the ambit of just in rem, and hence it cannot be arbitrated. Here too, my view is that it is purely contractual. The moment the dispute is contractual and there is no third party involvement or interference in that, then it can proceed. It is in these circumstances that Booz Allen has been referred to a larger bench. We are all awaiting for it, and I am sure that the entire judgment will be reversed. Of course, just in rem, those issues which are just in rem cannot be arbitrated. But at the same time, specific performance suit can be arbitrated, and there's not going to be any third party interest. And as and when a third party interest steps in, maybe that time it would be a different question. Here too, now we have to be aware of that courts have started initiating, saying that when a person wants to implead himself and a third party wants to implead himself into arbitration, they have been permitting impleadment of arbitration to have a consolidated approach of resolving dispute. So we are marching very fast and forward. So hopefully we will get all these disputes also to be arbitrated.
There's another question from Mr. Arun Kumar. What are the appeal remedies against awards?
Against an award, there is no appeal at all. See, the entire concept of arbitration is that a finality is arrived at between the parties. So there is no appeal remedy provided. However, a provision to set aside an arbitration award has been provided. The grounds for setting aside an arbitration award is in 34, which if I am going to narrate now, it will take another hour's time and more than that. I'm going to take another session, especially for the same. That time we will discuss on what grounds it can be set aside.
Another question, Mr. Raghavendran. If the arbitrator has passed an interim ex parte order, then arbitrator has the power to set aside the ex parte award before passing the final award.
Mr. Raghavendra, you asked two aspects. One, you started with saying ex parte order and then went on to complete it by saying an ex parte award. Now, I presume that you are going on the ex parte order. When an ex parte interim order has been passed, the arbitrator has the authority to set aside that or raise the interim order or vacate the interim order, as the case may be. But if, as I said earlier, if it is going to be setting aside of an award, then it would not be possible by the arbitrator.
He has also asked your views on the recent Supreme Court judgment in filing an appeal under Section 34 after the lapse of 120 days with a petition to condone delay under Section 5 of Limitation Act.
See, what has happened here is the Section 37, which provides for an appeal, does not give any time limit. The court has now is of the view now that since Section 37 only talks of an appeal, it doesn't talk about any limitation, and it leaves the entire appeal process to the regular process of the court, especially under 34. Once 34 alone is mentioned, after that what happens to that is 37 an appeal is mentioned, but then the process, entire thing is governed by the civil procedure or the OS rules for us. So in those circumstances, court has entertained the Section 5 of the Limitation Act. I only say that there is another perspective that has to be viewed. This is going to actually affect the entire disposal of the arbitration, the scope of arbitration. We all want to go for arbitration only so that the entire process is completed in a quick manner and expediently. But if condone delay of this nature also is allowed, then and also brought into this system, it is going to take time for resolving disputes.
This question is from Mr. Kumar. Are there any types of issues or cases in which it would be better not to have an arbitration clause in an agreement?
Yes, I have seen certain matrimonial matters where they incorporate arbitration clauses. See, in matrimonial matter, even in maintenance aspect, that and all cannot, those disputes cannot be arbitrated at all. So they keep involving arbitration clause into those things. And there are certain contracts where there are multi-parties would be involved, and all of them may not be the executant in a particular contract. The contract would have multivarious parties, and it would be in all directions. And it cannot be at any point of time stated that it is only the performance of the contract is only based on the executants there. So those contracts also, it is sort of cumbersome, and as of date, we have had Suganya, and then subsequently, I forgot the case name, Supreme Court judgment also, which combine the parties under one umbrella. If they're all coming under one umbrella, then umbrella contract, then all parties have been combined also. We have had both these things. Of course, it all is based on the nature of contract, how cumbersome it is, or how far-reaching with respect to third party it is. If it is within a particular group of people, then I would still say that arbitration clause is enough.
This is a question from Mr. Sudhakar. In ISDA agreement, which is International Swap and Derivatives Association Master Agreement, there is an arbitration clause and also a clause that the dispute can be referred to the courts of Bombay, whether it's an option for parties.
See, the moment you say that it has both the aspects have been given, arbitration and the court jurisdiction. Once the court jurisdiction comes in, the arbitration sets back. They cannot have such a clause, and with such organization, I don't know why they have had such a clause.
There's one question from Mr. SMS Devadas. What is the present legal position on the unilateral right of a party to appoint the arbitrator?
Devadas, I've already spoken on this at length in impartiality and applicability. It is available in the YouTube channel of Study Circle. Please subscribe to that and you can see that also, but I'll also answer your query. The present position with respect to unilateral appointment is the Supreme Court has held that a person who is interested in the outcome of the arbitration cannot appoint an arbitrator also, is what the Supreme Court has stated. I've dealt with it in detail in that particular session. It is available there. What happens is the entire shift has been made from the qualification of an arbitrator to the qualification of an appointing of a person. So which is not in accordance with the Arbitration Act. But as the law of the land would be, as on date, it is the person who is interested in the outcome of the arbitration award cannot appoint the arbitrator.
I think that would be the end of the Q&A session today.
Okay, friends, one second, I will finish off one thing. Friends, I've taken this series with an idea of covering up small portions by portions so that we can go in detail. I would only be presenting for about half an hour to 40 minutes, and then after I would expect you to question me and improve my knowledge. Next session, I will be proposing to talk on the, now that we have come up to the initiation of arbitration, the arbitration process has commenced. Now we'll go to the next aspect of appointment of arbitration and the process in which the arbitration has to be conducted. And I would also request you all to go through our Lex Study Circles YouTube. You will find all these videos therein, and subscribe to that also.
Thank you. Thank the speaker for taking his time out for giving us this lecture today as part of the lecture series that he is going to be giving. It was a very informative session combined with the lively Q&A post the lecture. I would like to thank the organizers for having organized this series and the participants for joining us today. The next session in this series with respect to the timing and the date would be updated in the WhatsApp group. Thank you one and all for joining us today.